Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Friday, October 4th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Iowa game is in 1 day. The game against Michigan in 56 days. Taking a look at the Ohio State defense today, we're doing it with our buddy Ross Fulton, the X's and O's guru at BuckeyeHuddle.com. When we have Ross on the show, we are sponsored by Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, the award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation today. Going to give you a little hint. If you're a Buckeye Huddle member, you were probably watching this at least 1 day early. We tend to post these Ross shows a little early. They take a little while to produce, so I always try and give myself a little extra time. But generally, if you're a member, you get a chance to see these a day earlier than the regular public. You also get a chance to ask Ross and the rest of our X's and O's team questions. So if you're thinking, boy, I wish we didn't have to wait till Thursday or Friday to see these shows, well, you don't have to, but you do have to be a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. This is a great time to become a member. Have memberships available starting at $4.99 for your first month. So if you've been thinking, hey, I wonder, maybe it's worth giving that a try, this would be a great time to do that. That is at BuckeyeHuddle.com. All right, sales pitch over. Let's talk some football. It was another night where the Ohio State Buckeyes held the opponent to under 10 points, just 7 points for the Michigan State Spartans. Buckeyes number one in the nation in scoring defense. Don't let Jim Knowles hear you say that. He called that rat poison earlier in the week. A little Nick Saban shout out there. But we're in the spirit of everyone's still a little bit grumpy, even though the defense is number one in the nation in scoring defense. We're going to start with some of the bad stuff that happened before we get to some of the good stuff. Sort of give you the why behind some of the stuff that did not work. We're going to start with the very first play of the game. Long run. It ended up being the long run of the night for the Michigan State Spartans. Ross, what went wrong here?
Yeah, and I have to say that I think that scoring number is a bit misleading. Obviously, when you create 2 turnovers inside the your own red or the inside the 20, that's going to help you when you Michigan State did move the ball early, right? But I will say that it certainly was not the case that the problems scheme wise that we saw against Marshall, it was just like run that back. In fact, it was a very different game plan. Addressing a lot of the issues we talked about. It was a far more aggressive game plan, which we'll see here. And you could actually see that right off the bat. So you got right away. I think this is a cover 2. It's almost, I think I'd call it a corner blitz from both corners. I'm guessing this was a game specific check against Michigan State when they'd get in these sort of tight bunch sets. And they would, I think that was probably a tell to Ohio State that Michigan State must run the ball a lot from these situations. Right away, we talked about, the week before playing with a heavy techniques, stunting, getting inside. So like removing conflict, like right off the bat, you see that here, the defensive line pinches inside. So that just means everyone's coming down to an interior gap from where they lined up. So you have the defensive tackles for the A gaps. You have the defensive ends coming inside. You'll see Jack Sawyer. So Denzel Burke then coming off the edge has the D gap. That leaves Sonny Styles here. He is now in this look. This is a 4-3. Ohio State played a lot of 4-3 on Saturday. Jordan Hancock, I think, had like 20 snaps. Obviously, that was somewhat because the starters did not play in the fourth quarter. But nevertheless, whenever Michigan State went to 12 or, 2 tight ends and a fullback, Ohio State went to a 4-3. When they do that, they also shuffle all their linebackers around, right? So you have Sonny Styles, who in their base 4-2-5 is the will linebacker. He's moving to Sam. So he's got different responsibilities. So here you can see from the end zone view, he has the C gap. And this is just really more of this is less scheme to me, and this is more execution. There's too much space there. He gets sucked inside. He lets the tight end seal him inside or get enough of him to seal him inside, and it just creates an open gap. And obviously they're doing this cover 2 where they have the safeties pretty deep protecting because, as I said, they're bringing the corners off the edge. Maybe you could criticize Denzel Burke's blitz path he takes here to help create this big gap. But I just saw there were too many times where Styles, especially as a Sam linebacker, playing this sort of 4-3 over where he has the C gap. He was just getting too far inside. He was just letting the ball bounce outside. He wasn't taking on a lead blocker with his, you want to take on the lead blocker with your inside shoulder towards the football so you can keep your outside arm free. You want to try to force the football back inside. And I would say, like, Michigan State, and we're going to see it on the next play too, had like a good game plan to start with. But a lot of it was just sort of, picking on Sonny Styles, for lack of a better term. And like, Jim Knowles talked, I know he was asked about Styles, and, his response was, well, we're asking him to try to play 3 different positions. And I think the obvious retort to that is like, well, why are you doing that? Like, he's not succeeding in any of them. So like, maybe we should cut that down. Like, I'm on record that I'm not a big fan of them playing this 4-3 or automatically going to it when teams play multiple tight ends. Partially because I'm just like, as a general matter, I don't think you should let the offense dictate your personnel packages automatically. But also just because like Jordan Hancock's better than their linebackers. And so like, why take a better player off the field? And it's just even more so like when you're then shuffling all the linebackers around, you're just putting more on their plate.
So why wasn't Jordan Hancock playing more? That was one of the questions we got a bunch during our post-game show that I kind of jotted down and said, I got to ask Ross about that this week. So there you go. That is one of your questions answered. Oh, here's another one. Ross, why the heck are they playing so far off the line of scrimmage with these corners? These corners can certainly play some bump and run coverage. Greg Schiano used to pound the table and say, we're a press man team. And now suddenly they have better corners and they're not always a press man team, or not nearly as much a press man team. So what's going on with that?
There are times where they play press, but like, you want to be varied, right? Like, if you did that all the time, we saw that with Greg Schiano. Like, they were predictable. They got picked on. And so here, like, you'll see them play press, but you'll also see them play off man. And one benefit of off man, I mean, there's a few, is it sets up their other coverages, right? So you don't necessarily know what you're getting at the snap. And so, like, I grabbed this example. This is quarter, half. We saw, again, so like a lot less cover 4 in this game, or the split safety concepts that we talked about against Marshall. You saw some cover half, quarter, half, a lot more cover 3, a lot more cover 1. So you're getting a lot more single high safety stuff. But like, this is quarter, half. So you do have, like, as you can see, like Denzel Burke is in a trap cover 2 position to the boundary. So like quarter, half just means playing cover 2 to the boundary, right? So you can see like Denzel Burke's up towards the line, and Latham Ranson is like a deep half safety, and then you're playing cover 4 to the field. And so that means that Caleb Downs and Davis and Igbinosa each have a quarter of the deep part of the field, right? And so you can see that play out here. The one thing I would say is this, again, like, I have not as much problem with the scheme. It's more the technique. Like, I don't know why Igbinosa's giving him such a free release to the sideline where his help is to the inside. You saw that in cover 1 too. Like, you've got a middle of the field safety, and so I'm like, why is Igbinosa giving him this like outside release? I know people complain like in cover 1, like on Michigan State's touchdown as well. Like, he was deeper. Again, they had stacked receivers. And so you do want, when you're playing man coverage, to have like your corners or your defensive backs at different levels, it's called, right? Like at different depths, so that if receivers cross, they don't run into each other and pick each other. So there's reasons for what they're doing. That was my sort of critique. Again, it's like with Styles, it's more of, this is actually less of like the scheme problems that I saw last week and more of a technique issue. Is I don't have a good explanation for why they're giving this sort of, free access to the sideline, other than the fact, I will say, like, this is a difficult throw and catch. Like, you don't see this very often in college football, like, where you're throwing from the opposite hash a deep out 20, 25 yards away. Like, I thought that, like the Marshall quarterback, I thought Childs made some plays early for Michigan State. He made some tough throws. I think, he kind of reverted to the mean as the game went on. Probably most emblematically, it's sort of just throwing it up to Denzel Burke in the flat in cover 2 for that pick late in the game, where it was like throwing it to no one. But as I said, he made some plays. And so maybe the concept here is just like, we'll give you that throw if you can make it, but we're going to take away the easier in breaking routes. So I think I have less problem with the off coverage. I think there's a time and a place for everything. I think you got to mix things up. And so you can't press every play.
All right, so now we have one more. We're starting with the bad plays, and we'll get to the good. Don't worry, there is good. There was plenty of good for the Ohio State defense on Saturday. We're going to get there in a minute. Here's where this show is going to take a little bit of a turn. We're gonna hit cover one. You just were talking about cover one a second ago. We're going to hit a play where they're in cover one. This ended up going for a long completion. This was actually, for those listening and not watching, this is the one that ended with the ball getting punched out. Really, really nice play chasing the ball down and punching it out. But this is a long play. We're not even going to get into the fumble portion of it because that's not really relevant here schematically. But this is a free safety blitz. They're in cover one. Why does this not go well until it does?
Yeah. And again, so, as I said, lots more single high safety concepts on Saturday against Michigan State. So more cover one, more blitzing, more cover three, some three cloud where you're playing cover three, but one of the corners is rolled up. So they're under part of the underneath coverage instead. And obviously, like, they got Caleb Downs involved by doing this, right? Like, they let him come up and play at the line of scrimmage. But as we talked about, like, there's a trade-off, right? So if you're going to be more aggressive, you're more susceptible to giving up a big play. And that happens here. And so the downside was, I think part of Michigan State's game plan early was they wanted to utilize their tight end and attack Styles in the passing game. And so we saw that in the first series, right, where they used that sort of delay where the tight end engaged with Styles, let him go. Styles attacked the quarterback. It was an easy dump off in the flat. Here, this is just more cover one. Again, when you're this is in the 4-2-5, but when you're bringing Downs off the edge, right, the linebacker is going to have to cover someone. Now, again, there's like technique issues here. He gets flat-footed. This is sort of an example of what I was just talking about with like having people at different levels, because he does get sort of tripped up here. He's trying to stay outside. The Michigan State wide receiver, basically, they kind of use like a weave or a switch concept where like the outside receiver cuts inside and the tight end kind of comes out and back in. And so he kind of gets picked a little bit. But again, like, these are sort of the trade-offs. As I said, I had less issues schematically for the most part with what they were doing. But I just think that the result is, the more you play cover one, the more you can sort of find the fish, as Urban Meyer liked to say. And, Michigan State had a pretty talented tight end. He's experienced, right? Like, as you get into better players, these are going to be some of the trade-offs. And so, again, this is also partly why I say to get back to the 4-3 issue. I know this was a 4-2-5 rep here. But, in terms of the Sam covering the tight end, like, I would personally like to take my chances with Jordan Hancock on the field. He can cover the tight end then and cover one. And if you force him to play inside in the C gap, like, he's done pretty well at that. I would like to see a team have success running on Ohio State against their base 4-2-5 defense before they switch automatically to 4-3 again, because you're just personnel questions. There's changes in fits. And so that is sort of a bigger picture issue. But here it's just, again, like Michigan State, there were little things during the game, like, why did Ohio State play so much better in the second half, right? I do think they probably less. They did run a little bit of cover four early, and like we saw a few issues with that when they got spread out. They went away from that. They played probably less cover one later, but more cover three. I think the defensive tackles in particular were more active later in the game. Getting Tyleik Williams back will make a big difference, because they count on the defensive tackles to do a lot and control the line of scrimmage. And so, like, that's a big deal. Obviously, we will get to how they engage Caleb Downs more and more. But I just think some of it early was like Michigan State had a good game plan, and like they successfully targeted Ohio State the right places, and they just were some technique breakdowns.
And they did unleash, I think was the word that Jim Knowles used in terms of what they did with Caleb Downs. It felt like we went through 3 games and kind of he was there, but you didn't really notice him that often. You saw him on Saturday. You definitely saw him there. The next play is a cover one invert. And so for those who are, I'll do the translation there. instead of the deep safety, the free safety, the adjuster, Caleb Downs being the deep guy, well, they invert it, and the boundary safety, the bandit safety, Lathan Ransom, he's the deep guy, and that frees up Caleb Downs to go make a play right at the line of scrimmage. Ross, how did I do?
Exactly. Like there's different terms for it. And to be honest, like sometimes with run plays, like this could be a blitz. He's so aggressive coming downhill. It's hard to tell whether he is responsible for the tight end, if he did release in coverage or not. There were times where like Downs, they did roll him down in cover one. I mean, they brought Ransom down. The thing about Ohio, like I would say again, like back to the Hancock discussion, like you want to obviously emphasize no matter what you're talking about, the strengths of your personnel, right? And like Ohio State has two really good safeties, and for better or worse, what they're both really good at is coming downhill, right? I'm not sure you'd say either of them are like a middle of the field Malik Hooker type necessarily, but so you want to give them opportunities to do this. That's why, like, even when we're talking about their cover four, I'm good with them playing cover four as long as they let the safeties trigger aggressively and fill some of those run gaps, and like let the corners sort of cap routes or be the deep, cover deep in effect. But here, again, we talked about changing things up, using the defensive line to help out, right? So it's not just like Downs flying down. This is actually a nice concept. So this is a 4-3. This is a 4-3 under, which just means that Styles is the Sam is actually like up on the line of scrimmage. So it looks like a 5-2, right? And so they spike the defensive end inside. They have Styles play contain. And so they're letting Downs come straight downhill to play the C gap. And so these are what, like, just like we talked about with Marshall, like this is one way you can make up for, having guys out of the box going forward, is just letting the safeties fill an interior gap like this. And obviously Downs made a bunch of plays like this. We saw sort of the downside, right, of bringing him down with that last tight end completion against Styles. But I think they also brought Ransom down at times. The Childs fumble, most notably with Ransom. And so I just think that like that's really the strength of this defense, is just coming up with different ways to like get the two of those guys coming downhill. So that's again why like, well, they don't want to play press man all the time because you want your safeties involved in different ways, right? So like no matter what, you don't want to be predictable. I do think now that they are starting through 4 games, the good news is like we can see quite a bit of variety out of what Ohio State's done if you take it collectively through those 4 games. And so obviously this was really effective. This basically like staunched the bleeding, so to speak, was letting Downs make some plays. And so I have to imagine that will be a big part of things going forward.
All right. It feels like Sonny Styles has been catching some strays from the Ohio State fan base over the last couple weeks. But we're going to wrap up here with a really nice play by Sonny Styles. He ended up getting a sack on this one. This is a zone blitz look from the Buckeyes. Ross, walk us through this last one.
Yep. And again, I just don't want people to leave with the impression that like the problems from last week, they were the same problems necessarily, right? Like they may have gave up yards early, but it was a very different game plan, a much more varied one. And so again, we talked about this concept actually against Western Michigan when Cody Simon almost intercepted that pass. And so again, this is another trap 2 concept. So I've talked about using more zone blitzes, more creeper pressures, where you're bringing 4 or 5 and playing zone behind it. This is an example. And they ran this concept at least 3 times in the game. And so, again, you're bringing pressure off the field edge, and you can tell it's like a steal concept because, again, like Lathan Ransom, how he turns his shoulders towards the field side, right? He's basically ready to pick up a receiver breaking in. And so, again, a lot of times quarterbacks, like the old adage is to throw where the blitz is coming from. Like this is trying to trap the quarterback into doing so, right? So like Denzel Burke stepping hard up in the flat, Lathan Ransom's coming to like pick in the middle of the field. You basically lock the other side corner. So Igbinosun is just covering the tight end and man. And then you still have like a deep defender in Downs to the field side. So they ran this here. They ran it when right before the 4th down quarterback sneak stop. They were running this when Igbinosun made the tackle just short of the sticks. So again, we are seeing more variety out of the defense. So I do think, saw more stunting. Here they're bringing more pressure. I think you'll see that continue. I don't think it was just because of Michigan State. I think this was sort of the plan. And I think you'll see more of that going forward, just particularly because, as you said, like, I do think Styles is in a tough spot, right? Like he did in fact play, he reclassified, he played a different position. Like, yes, he's sort of been a Sam linebacker before, but now he's playing Will, but he's also asked to be a Sam. That's a lot to put on his plate. But he's pretty effective as a blitzer. And so I think you'll continue to see, hopefully, as I've advocated for, more of these zone blitz, creeper, 2 and 3 deep coverage concepts.
All right. And you will hopefully also see more of these shows in the coming weeks, as Ross and I will try and have an offense show, a defense show every week. Going to be a lot to talk about with the Buckeyes. There's going to be a lot to talk about at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. Got our whole team of X's and O's gurus, including Ross, to make you a smarter football fan. As I said earlier, we will drop these shows usually a day or so earlier for our members to be able to take a look at, ask a bunch of questions. You have follow-up questions on this? Well, our X's and O's guys are there on the board pretty much every day answering your questions. If you have follow-ups, you have, hey, I'd love to see this discussed next week. We'll try and accommodate that as well. So one more reason to become a member at BuckeyeHuddle.com today. Again, we're running a sale for your first month. You get $4.99. That gives you access for a full month of coverage. There's going to be a lot of interesting football and a lot of stuff to talk about over that next month. We'd love to see you there at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We'd also love to see you at Jeff Ruby's Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steak, seafood, and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus, check out the menu, and make a reservation today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.